in headquarters. Started the midwinter recitation practice. And this morning, maybe many of you have seen online the chanting from the headquarters, led by Reverend Kosei. Well, this morning, many of you have joined the U.S. nationwide national midwinter recitation practice. Thank you very much for the many people to attend this morning. And leader was the Pearl from Hawaii. And it was 4 o'clock in the morning in Hawaii time. And all the Sangha gathered at the Dharma Center, and it was very real midwinter practice for them. And once again, thank you very much for participation. And today, good morning again to a Transatlantic Sangha. Good evening to Europe and Brazil. We have a presentation from one of the renowned Midwest Dharma Center from Oklahoma. And presentation will be the minister of Oklahoma Church. Please welcome Reverend Kris Ladusau.
Good morning. Thank you so much. You know, as human beings, our time here is limited. And so when we look at that aspect of things, sharing time together is a treasure. So I want to thank you all for sharing your treasure with me this morning. It's really nice to see everyone. Some people I know, some people I haven't met maybe or haven't seen for a long time. So I appreciate the technology to be able to do this. So thank you all for joining us today. Emmy, could you please load the PowerPoint for me? Thank you. Okay, so today I thought we would talk a little bit about skillful means. And this is something obviously that is very important for Rissho, Kosei and probably life in general. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. This is a huge concept. Skillful means is a huge concept. Actually, we could spend a whole weekend discovering or uncovering the layers of it. Next slide. So let's look at the terminology involved in this. In the Sanskrit language, which is a East Indian language, the word for skillful means is upaya. And from the Japanese language, we know that the corresponding term would be Hoben. Of course, the one that we're using now in English is skillful means, but there are other options. Who's got an idea of another version of skillful means in the English language? Just shout it out.
Appropriate response.
Appropriate response. Roger, I love that. I like appropriate means a lot. You know, when I think of skillful means, I think of a skill like an artisan or an athlete maybe being skillful. So appropriate to me, I like appropriate a lot too, because it's appropriate to each and every situation. So I like that one. Who's got another version of this in English?
Tactful ways.
I'm sorry, say it a little bit louder.
Tactful ways.
Tactful ways, yes. Is that Kevin?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you very much. Tactful is another really good one, which kind of, for me, reminds me of like a skillful strategy, almost a way that we've really well considered. Anybody else have another one?
I would like timely.
Timely. Oh, I love that. I haven't heard that one. Okay. So timely. I love that. That's great. Thank you for that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So in ancient India, knowledge was held in high esteem. So when we look at the structure of the Threefold Lotus Sutra, and the first sutra of the three was basically focusing on knowledge, I think that that was no mistake that that was listed up front and brought in at the very beginning. So if we were to divide the Lotus Sutra, the Threefold Lotus Sutra, into segments and associate something with each segment, I would say that there's a possibility of acknowledging that the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings, which is the first sutra, could be correlated to knowledge. And I would say the lotus flower, the wondrous dharma, the meat of the sandwich, I think addresses the aspect of compassion through all of the things that we learn through those chapters. And then finally, the third sutra would be contemplating universal sage. And I associate that one with practice. So you can see that actually the entire structure of the text is an example of skillful means. Next slide. So the importance in the Lotus Sutra and the Kyoten both of skillful means. Obviously, we're going to look at chapter 2 of the Lotus Sutra, which is actually called Skillful Means. So some aspects of that would include the sutra actually devoting an entire chapter to skillful means. There's 26 pages of chapter 2 in the new translation dealing with the aspect of skillful means. So that shows you that having an entire chapter devoted to it makes it pretty special. Chapter 2 is the most important chapter in the first half of the Lotus Sutra. So that is key. That one is designated. Obviously, we chanted it this morning, and it is considered to be one of the most important aspects when we did the translation of the new sutra. The first 2 chapters that we tackled for the new translation were chapter 2 and 16. The third aspect here, Rissho Kosei chose chapter 2 to be part of our Kyoten, as we experienced this morning. So we know that it is a very important chapter. Because they chose that to be part of our daily chanting. The next thing I thought about was Buddha quietly rising from samadhi and giving the wisdom found in chapter 2. And then finally, Buddha also shared in chapter 2 the reality of all existence at the end of that chapter. So what are some of the things that you all like about chapter 2?
It's very thoughtful and purposeful.
Excellent. Is that Linda? Or who am I speaking? Who am I speaking? Laura. Laura, thank you. I don't have your pictures up, so I couldn't tell. I was trying to guess. Yes, tell me more about that.
Well, Buddha was in samadhi, which means that he was meditating, contemplating. So the way the whole chapter is written out, you can see the skillful thoughtfulness of how he put it together, and very purposeful, because it teaches us to be very planned, and to not just do things because, we want to do them, but to think about who our audience is, the situation it is, what does the other person need from us? So, to be very, very purposeful in our actions when we are thinking about others first.
That's awesome. Yes, I love that. And the more you talk now, I recognize your voice. It's good to hear you. So that's a wonderful point. Let's go to the next slide. So more skillful means from the sutra. Okay, so we're going to cover a few things, but by no means does this cover all of the examples of skillful means from the sutra. Please don't think that I'm just trying to say it boils down to these, because like I said, we could spend a whole weekend talking about this and giving examples in different details and in different layers. But let's look at a few things. So Sutra of Innumerable Meanings, chapter 2. In chapter 2, we see the fastest way to enlightenment. Okay? The fastest way to enlightenment. It was up to this point in study of Buddhism, it was thought, it was naturally assumed that it would take many lifetimes to achieve enlightenment. But in the text of Innumerable Meanings, it says, what's the fastest way to achieve enlightenment? And I don't recall that was ever asked before. So that was kind of one of the many unique factors of the Lotus Sutra, was to say, this is a different approach. So from the very first sutra of the threefold Lotus Sutra, in the second chapter, Innumerable Meanings, we're wanting to know now the fastest way to enlightenment. And of course, when the people in the sutra ask that question to the Buddha, we are also included in that. So now we are also wanting to discover the fastest way to enlightenment. The second thing from Sutra of Innumerable Meanings is that the innumerable ways come from the one Dharma. And the question to you is, what is the one Dharma? What is it? Who knows? I was thinking somebody might know. I know I'm going to say the word and you're going to go, oh yeah, of course. The innumerable ways come from the one, and the one Dharma is emptiness. Okay, that's where everything comes from. All right, so let's go to the Lotus Sutra, chapter 3, which is the parable of the burning house. So in that chapter, and I don't have to tell the story. I think most people understand the story of that. If you don't, please raise your hand. And Chris Peters, would you let me know if anybody raises their hand on anything?
Sure.
Parable of the burning house. The father in the story, which corollary for the father figure is the Buddha, knew his children, and he knew them well. And what he did as a part of skillful means is that he skillfully rescued them and guided them to the best possible. Right? So on this slide, the first category here of innumerable meanings is skillful means of leading others to the most expedient way to enlightenment. The second example here is the skillful means of a mentor guiding their children, Dharma children, or students to their best possible or their highest transformation. Let's go next slide. Another example would be from Parable of the Poor Son in chapter 4 of the Lotus Sutra. And in this one, the parent figure, or the father, skillfully nurtured the son into his full expression of his own Buddha nature. So that was very skillfully done. And in the Parable of the Magic City, who knows what chapter that's in? Just shout it out.
7.
7, thank you very much. So in the Parable of the Magic City, Kevin, are you on with us?
It looks like Kevin's away from the camera. Oh, there he is.
I'm here.
Okay, could you, Reverend Kev, could you tell us the story of the Magic City in 60 seconds?
Well, thanks for the heads up. The story of the Magic City in 60 seconds. The followers are the disciples of the Buddha are being instructed by the Buddha to let's see, how shall I explain? He's talking about nirvana. Is that where you want me to go?
Yeah, just the story part. Not, you don't have to worry about the essence of the explanation. Just give us the story real quick.
Just the story of members who are reached as far as they can travel, if you will, and kind of reached a state of, I don't want to say exhaustion, but have gotten to the point where they can go no further. And the Buddha skillfully creates an oasis for them to rest and before moving on to bigger teaching, if you will.
Yes.
Is that good enough?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks. Okay, so that's kind of the encapsulated version of that. And obviously it's told in a parable form. So it's you go along the story with them, but you see things in the explanation of that from the transcendent viewpoint. In other words, you see the skillfulness of the leader in the parable, guiding the people in a tactful way so that he gives them time to rest, but he also says, we're almost there, let's go ahead and go. And so, in other words, it's being cognizant of people's capacities. It's being aware of, a compassionate exchange of time together, letting people rest if they need to, but then also nurturing them to continue on to the bigger picture. And the most important part of what is available to all of us, actually. So I'd like to just ask for a couple of inputs from your takeaway from this skillful means of the magic city. Has anybody got an example of a magic city? Have you had one? What was your awakening to that? Or do you like this chapter? Give me some feedback on this, please.
This is Kathy from Oklahoma. As Kevin was describing it, it's like the people on the journey didn't know at first that this was a magic city, and so what hit me just this minute was how often in our lives we're going along and we're exhausted and we want to give up hope. But if we think about the magic city, we can have confidence that we are being led to something that will take care of our needs and yet keep moving us forward. So in the times in our lives when we don't know what's going on, we can still have confidence. And Reverend Yoshizawa talked about this last night in the Lotus Sutra class in innumerable meanings, that when we observe the four aspects of emerging, settling, changing, and vanishing, we can have confidence that things do change, that we're not stuck. And right now, that's a particularly good lesson for me. So just in this parable, knowing that even when we don't know, there is still a guide here taking us to someplace better. And
Right.
Hopefully that is to enlightenment. We will get there.
That's great. Thank you so much. Let's hear somebody else's version. What is your takeaway?
Linda has her hand up.
Okay, great, Linda.
Thank you.
That was two Lindas here.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Go
those
first,
people.
Linda.
A lot of those smart ladies. To me, it's a spiritual journey,
Hmm.
and it's to help. It's to gain enlightenment, trying to overcome as many problems along the way as you can, and it's a way to. To me, it's a good way to go through with the continue the journey. Being a 30-year Army veteran, I had this practice lots of times, not knowing what I had, especially in wartime. And it's just such a great enlightenment journey. And I just love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear someone else.
Hi, other Linda. We have a lot of challenges sometimes in the morning chant. For me, the magic city is that sometimes Buddhism is drinking from a fire hose. There's so much stuff, especially the Lotus Sutra. And sometimes something will ping and you can stop for a moment and savor it and really get all together into how it works and what it means to you at that moment. And then you take a deep breath and you're ready to dive back in again. So I look at it as a respite so that you can absorb everything. You can digest what was given because there's so much richness there. It's like the really rich dessert. You have to stop and take a sip of coffee. You have to let it kind of settle before you can dig back in because there's so much there.
Yes.
So that's what I look at this as. You're allowed to stop, rest, digest, before you go on again. And it's built into it at the end of each chapter or in the middle of a chapter. There's always nice places to stop and savor before you go on to the next section or next chapter. There's some really nice breaks built into the Lotus Sutra.
That's great. Wonderful comments. One more thought on this, anybody?
Kris, could I just add something?
Hi, my name is Cornelia. Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Okay. When we were talking about this chapter, a memory came up in me when I came, and I can very much relate that to the chapter Magic City. When I came over about 31 years ago from Germany to the United States, I was kind of lost in this culture here and I had only a boyfriend, but didn't know anybody else. And so I had sometimes moments where I just were sad or desperate. What am I doing here? And I had two occurrences. One time I was taking a shower and the voice behind me occurred, "You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." And everything was just really white in this shower, the light. And the other experience was probably the same year, because it was a difficult year. I was laying down at the beach and I had just had an argument with my new boyfriend here. And there was the same voice, "You're going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay." And I never will forget this experience. And I very much relate that to the chapter of the Magic City, that we are going to be okay. And it's going to be safe for us. Thank you for letting me sharing that.
Sure. Thank you for sharing. That's wonderful. One thing I think about when I think about the Magic City, and obviously the point needs to be reinforced for everyone that you're teaching, is that the Magic City, as was mentioned earlier, is not known to the people on the trip. It's not known. And I think that that's key, because a lot of people, I think, misunderstand at the beginning, thinking that they're choosing their own Magic City. They're choosing their own time to rest. And of course, everybody can remember a time in their life when they chose to rest. But this is definitely a little bit different than that. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands the thrust of that story. So one thing I think about when I think about the Magic City is a quote from a philosopher, Soren Kierkegaard, that said, "Life must be lived forward, but understood backwards." So I think that that is a true statement. And I think a lot of what we do when we reflect on our lives, as we learn to do in Buddhism, is a lot of introspection and self-reflection, which is primary to what we're doing. I think when we do that, we can reflect back on our lives and we see things in a different way. We may see them from a new perspective. We may not have understood the things that were happening to us at the time that they did. However, later in life, from my own experience, I have looked back and thought, oh my gosh, if I hadn't done this, then this other thing wouldn't have happened. So it's in that reflection back that we understand life a little bit better. So I think about Magic City from that standpoint also. Let's go to the next slide, please. So in chapter 8 of the Lotus Sutra, we learn about Purna and Purna's half-step approach to leading. Purna was an interesting character, and he's known, it seems like a lot of the Buddhists, disciples of the Buddha, were kind of known for certain skill sets, or maybe they were famous for one thing. And Purna, the word that I always think about when I hear Purna's name is eloquence. Evidently, he was a very good speaker, and that was a strong suit that he had. Not everybody has that, but he did. But I think the interesting thing about Purna is that he was actually a bodhisattva, but he didn't dress like one. If you look at the paintings, the statues of Buddhas, of the bodhisattvas, you see differences in the aspects of their depiction. And so for bodhisattvas, you see what I call large hairdos and jewelry and a little bit nicer clothing than you would see on some of the statues of a Buddha. And so those are designated by those things. So Purna didn't dress differently like that. He really gave the appearance of more being a Shravaka or Pratika Buddha, perhaps, so that I think he did that so that he was approachable. For some people, it's a little scary to think that you could become a Buddha immediately, but the skillful means of the sutra introducing the concept of bodhisattva and the concept of Shravaka and Pratika Buddha. So, well, I don't feel like I could do Buddha, but I could sure be a Shravaka, or I could sure be a bodhisattva. I think I've been a Shravaka, I've been learning, but now I want to be a bodhisattva. So I've got an example in the sutra of that too. So I think I could do that. So it's incremental in our approach to even how we present the teachings and the adaptation to those teachings. So Purna, even though he was doing the bodhisattva actions, kind of presented himself as a Shravaka so that he was more approachable. I think this leans into his half-step approach to leading. And just from personal experience in teaching in America, I think half-step approach to leadership is a good way to do it. And the reason I say that is in America, everybody by and large feels like we are on the same level. We have designated positions sometimes organizationally, but everybody believes they're a good driver. Everybody believes that they could run a Dharma center. Everybody believes that they could do whatever is needed. And I think that is an American thing, and maybe in some other cultures too. But I think the half-step approach is really fitting for teaching in America because everybody's right there with you. And if you're just a half a step ahead, they feel like you're part of the group too, and they like that. I think that is something that has shown to be true for me. The top-down version, which works well in some places, does not work, I don't think, as well in America because of this aspect. So we're more of a horizontal society than a vertical, perhaps, and maybe that's what I want to say. So Purna's half-step approach to me, I think, is a really good one. So I just wanted to say that. Anybody have any other thoughts on Purna real quick? Okay, let's go ahead and talk about this other example from chapter 16. And this is the most important chapter from the second half of the Lotus Sutra. Buddha reveals his eternal being or his eternal aspect. That is huge. And that is a skillful means because up to this time, that wasn't revealed. So there's a lot being revealed in chapter 15 and 16. And then the other aspect of chapter 16, of course, would be the parable of the physician and his children. So in that one, the skillful means becomes apparent when the physician guides his children to health. So that's another example of skillful means found. Let's go to the next slide, please. Always remember, all of Buddha's teachings are skillful means, not just chapter 2 of the Lotus Sutra. He taught in various ways according to his audience's capacity and understanding. We'll see this over and over again in the sutra. So he taught by direct transmission, of course. He taught by parables, and some of those we have talked about this morning. He used past life experiences found all through the Lotus Sutra. And what are some other ways of skillful means that you see from either your own practice or from the Lotus Sutra? Anybody?
Yeah, I'd just like to say actions.
Actions.
Yeah, what you do and how you do it is sometimes is often very impactful for people.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's great. Would anybody else like to share?
Yeah, I've got one.
Okay.
I appreciate encounters with strangers and kind of the unscripted experience.
Yeah.
And so I start to think about the parable of the burning house. and teaching and guiding others according to their desires. And when you're mindful and encountering a stranger, if you listen deeply, you can get an idea of what their language is and speak their language back to them. And sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes it's more subtle. But I had a conversation with a guy in a shop in Santa Fe, New Mexico last July, and lots of beautiful rugs and some furniture and a little bit of Buddhist art. And right in the middle of the shop, I went past this man's desk, and there was a giant framed mural on the wall behind his desk. I'd glanced at it, passing by a couple times, and before I left, I stopped and I looked really close. He invited me to move in closer to the mural, and because it was very large and it had so many different scenes playing out in it. And that's what I ended up spending most of my time in the shop looking at. And he commented on how he could just sit there for large portions of his day looking at it because there's so many different scenes playing out together. And so before I left, I asked him if he had ever read the Lotus Sutra, and shared with him that because he loved everything going on and the complexity and so many characters in that mural, for a literary equivalent, he might enjoy reading the Lotus Sutra. And so he'd heard of it before, hadn't read it, and I wished I'd had a copy with me. I would have loved to have gifted him a copy then, but offered what I had and encouraged him to check out the Lotus Sutra because I could see some parallels between what he appreciated about that mural and that he might find some of the same interest in the Lotus Sutra and learn something from it as well. So it was a really good exchange. So you can feel a connection there. I hope he ended up picking it up.
I do too. And that's a wonderful example of how to guide people to the Dharma. And Kris, you're reading my mind, as you're going to see in a future slide. So thank you for sharing that story. Let's go to the next one. All right, skillful means of our teachers and mentors and some stories. Stories of skillful means, we've talked already about Buddha's teaching in the sutra. Is there another example of Buddha's skillful means that somebody wants to mention?
Yeah, I have an example. Someone who introduced me to Buddhism many, many years ago worked a lot in a corporate setting, and he worked at the boardroom level, a lot of times working in situations where different aspects of the company were at odds, and he was creating consensus between different people that may not have necessarily wanted consensus. And he told me, he said he constantly meditated, and he also circumambulated outside of the building a lot when he was just before the meetings and after the meetings. And he said he'd attend these meetings, and he would just simply do his work, try to build consensus and all this thing. And he was a contractor, so he didn't work in the company all the time. And after a little while, a couple of months of doing this, he got a comment back, some feedback from the audience, and they said, we don't know what it is about you, but every time you're in the room, things just seem to go better. And this whole time he was working on cultivating positive energy and just being, a positive energy generator and trying to foster that. And I just thought that was, like a really high compliment. And they didn't know what he was doing, and he never talked about Buddhism, but that was the feedback he got. So
that's awesome. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. It's good to see you. So Founder Niwano, I know that I had a wonderful opportunity to meet him twice, but I know some of the newer members may not have had the opportunity to meet him. And I will tell you, he was a really remarkable person for so many reasons. But skillful means, he was very, very good with skillful means. And a lot of examples. Reverend Yoshizawa, do you have a skillful means of founder Niwana you'd like to share?
Yeah, maybe next time.
Okay, all righty. I remember him being very conscientious and compassionate. There was a story about a young woman who was serving him tea at a formal occasion, and she was so nervous she forgot to put tea in the cup. She brought it in, set it down in front of him, and when he took off the little lid, there wasn't anything in there. And he picked it up and acted like he drank it and said, "May I have some more?" How compassionate, right? Not to embarrass her. Yeah, very compassionate. So
we've
go
got
ahead.
somebody with their hand up.
Okay.
Linda.
Okay.
Thank you. My most skillful mentor is Reverend Kevin. He has been talk about going in the room and everything's okay. He has taught me so much, and he's so compassionate, and he follows all the way through everything. Plus, he can make some really good jokes. So I would definitely, he is my skillful memes. Thank you.
That's wonderful, Linda. Thank you so much. And I agree with you on that. So, you know, we have other people here that are part of Rissho Kosei Kai that obviously we've been influenced from exposure to them. More people may have met President and perhaps Kosho. Does anybody have a skillful means that they connect with President or Kosho-sama? Dave Rose, you got any connection from the time you gave Dharma Journey?
Yeah, a feeling of inevitability leading up to it. It was, you know, it was remarkable. I'm reminded when we talk about this stuff of my favorite thing about RK that the founder said was enlightenment was in the encounter. And it just applies, it kind of turned the whole way I saw Buddhism from this doctrine, you know, this intellectual curiosity and stuff into something very practical, because it takes you, and like David was talking about, our actions, you know, have an impact on things. And I think every time I go to the grocery store, I think of that enlightenment is in the encounter. And every time I go to check out, it's my job not to buy groceries. It's my job to try and make the person that I'm dealing with there feel a little bit better about herself or himself for that day. And it's just, and the same thing applies to pretty much anywhere you go. And I love that it's so remarkable. And when I went to Japan, you know, I could see that in Reverend Kosho too, because you could tell that she was intensely present for each time. Every time I've been around her, when she came to Oklahoma and then again in Japan, she's been intensely present in that moment. You know, they say that you can change yourself and the world will change. And she's a perfect example of that, you know, because she changes the room. She walks into a room and the room changes when she walks in, and it changes because of the person she is and the presence that she has and the mindfulness that she exhibits when she's in those settings. So
that's great. Tell me, remind everybody, or you and I had a conversation recently about her comments when she gifted you the beads.
Yeah, the beads that were a gift when I went over to do my Dharma journey at the Great Sacred Hall. And she told me, you know, when she handed me these beads, she said, these are not to be put on the altar or kept aside or something. These are your everyday beads. Take them out and use them every day. And I've done that ever since. And I love it. It's, in fact, I have 3 sets of beads. I have my wife's beads that I use once a week, and I have the beads she gave me once a week, and I use these the rest of the time. So.
Do you feel like that was a good skillful means from Kosho-sama?
Oh, it was. very definitely. Because I know that, you know, people get the idea, well, I got these from this person and I have to save them. I can't use them. I don't want to wear them out or something like that. But that's what they're for. And she made that clear. These are for your practice. These are not to be set aside and kept as a keepsake.
That's great. Thank you, Dave. Let's go to the next slide real quick. So Buddhism does a lot of amazing things, but one of the things that I think is relevant to our discussion this morning is that Buddhism expands perspectives, and the whole focus is liberation from suffering, of course. So as we encounter people and we guide people, let's meet that person where they currently are mentally, emotionally, spiritually, ask them questions with an open heart. And I think an interesting thing has the possibility of happening. If we change I to we, even illness can change to wellness. So as we interact with others, then that is what is the natural outcome. Next slide, please. Examples from our lives. I had, and Kris Peters, here's where I've got you written down to talk, but you gave us the story already, which is wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I had a friend in Norman, Oklahoma, south of Oklahoma City, who was really struggling. And I was talking to her, but she just wasn't quite ready to talk about it yet. But I did want to polish the floor at the Dharma Center. I like to do that. It's a meditation for me. And I thought, you know, I'm going to ask her to come over and spend some time with me. But I knew that, you know, how some people, they'll do something if they feel like they can be of service. And so I said, I've got to polish the floor. And if you help me do it, we'll get it done twice as fast. Would you be willing to come up? And she said, of course. And so what happened was, as we were polishing the floor, she began to talk. And so that was a way that she was able to open up and release her suffering. And she felt better after we finished, and we got the polished floor. So to me, maybe that's a small example of a skillful means, perhaps. Roger, I know you worked with geriatric care for years, and you are very active still as a mentor with AA. Do you have an example, quick example of something there that you used or heard skillful means?
I'm sorry, Kris, I was on the phone and I missed your question.
Oh, I just was asking if you had a short story from either your time working with geriatric care or as a mentor in AA. Do you have a good example of skillful means that you either heard or gave?
Well, you know, a lot of what's been covered, I think, already is, you know, a strong personal presence. That's what I thought about in most, a warm personal presence.
Yeah.
That lets them know that you're important, they're important to you, and
yeah.
that development is important to you. And even if they hardly know you, if you can show some insight into their situation and that you understand and
Yeah.
wish to help,
Yeah.
even if there's not much you can do and it's mostly up to them, it's still encouraging. That's how I was treated and how I, in the program, and also with, to bring what light I could, you know, doing investigations in nursing homes was often a pretty dark situations to be in, with people who were at the end of their life with little hope. And you try to bring what light you could to them.
Yeah.
And express your understanding of how hard it is, just that sort of thing.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. And that's very, very skillful on your part to be able to have that perception and awareness. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I'm assuming that perhaps since the time that you began practicing Buddhism and up to this point, your understanding of skillful means may have changed according to your life experience. and the examples that people have shared in Hosa Circle together. Let's go to the next slide. So I wrote this a couple of years ago, and this is really my thoughts on what I call stepping stones. And this is about mentorship. This is about skillful means, as I have had the wonderful experience to learn and grow in this capacity for skillful means. I'll just read this to you all right now. I'd like to close with this. Many years ago, when I was traveling in Japan, I had the opportunity to spend some time visiting very old and beautiful gardens. All of them had a unique beauty, and I reflected on the considerable amount of thought, planning, and continual care that went into each one of them. One of the gardens incorporated a large pond of water in its design. Across the water were stepping stones that helped visitors cross to the other side safely and see the garden from new and different perspectives. As I took each step, I paused and took it all in, realizing how much I appreciated the thoughtfulness of the design and the master gardeners who'd created it. Years later, I could see a correlation to the teaching of the Dharma. As I traversed the Bodhisattva path, my teachers created stepping stones to guide me through my process. They gave me a nudge when I needed it. They suggested practices, books to read, speeches to write, and opportunities to experience sharing the teachings with others. And although there may have been times when I was a bit scared to go to the next step, I had full trust in my teachers, knowing that they too had been guided through the same process by those who came before them. I realized that without these stepping stones, I might be struggling inefficiently, sunk down in the water, trying to swim my way to a better understanding on my own. I might get too tired and turn back, missing the opportunity to grow and perhaps never finding the new view and understanding that I was sincerely seeking. By making use of the stepping stones, I'm able to be sure-footed and maintain a perspective above the water. I can see where I've been and trust where I'm going. I can make faster progress on the path, resting periodically and appreciating the bigger view. When I became a teacher, I noticed myself incorporating the style of Dharma guidance I had received from my mentors. After carefully observing each individual in my Sangha and trying to grasp their abilities, energies, and depth of devotion, I became focused on trying to create the most efficient way for each of them to continue growing in their study and practice by pointing out the stepping stones. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, this is my comment to you all. Everything in this world is skillful means. Please develop the awareness to see it and recognize it. Next slide. Thank you all very much for this opportunity. It's wonderful to connect with you. Thank you to Arkina and everyone supporting these broadcasts. And it's lovely to see everyone. I hope soon in the future we'll be able to see each other face to face again and give you a big hug. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all your words of wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Kris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Kris.
Thank you very much, Reverend Kris. So let's have applause.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I don't think we have the time for questions. Its time is up. So let's close the day. I pass the mic to Emi-san.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Reverend Kris. Our next meeting will be February 3rd, and we would have Reverend Matsubara will be giving a presentation. So see you then, and we'll close with the chanting of the Daimoku 3 times.
Don't we have the Sunday night thing with Reverend Matsubara?
Oh, the Dharma Dojo?
Yes.
The Dharma Dojo will start on the 23rd, too. So it's double dose of Reverend Matsubara.
Yay!
So Dharma Dojo is on Sunday, the 23rd, January 23rd. The next Transatlantic is February 3rd with Reverend Matsumoto. Okay. Okay, we'll close with the chanting of the Daimoku 3 times. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Eternal Buddha Shakyamuni, founder Nikkyo Niwano, thank you very much.
Thank you.
President Nichiko Niwano, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Reverend Kris, thank you very much. And everyone, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you,
See
Amy.
you soon.
Arigato gozaimasu.
Arigatou gozaimashita.
Arigatou
Thank you.
gozaimashita.
Thank you, Chris. That was great.
Thanks, everybody.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
Oh, Dr. Scaranta.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
ありがとうございました。
はい、
あり
バイ
がとうございま
バ
した。Thank you.
There's
Weber India.
Webaleño,
Weber Daniel.
Oh yeah. How do you say that? Bavareño.
Weber Daniel.
Wevareño.
Amy, do you stop the recording on that side?
Oh shoot, I forgot.
Webaleño.